Hello everyone, it's me again and it's King Kong again because in my previous post I talked a bit about my impressions of King Kong based on trailer viewings, and I described an ideal King Kong movie if I had the entire control and the means to film one. And obviously, I had to follow that up with seeing the actual film itself, which I promptly did, and it was a really much better movie than I expected. I will talk about that today briefly, but before that, I just want to send shout outs to everyone who's been viewing, commenting, and actually participating in these podcast discussions with me. I guess the age of YouTube finally has arrived. I don't know. And I was really happy to see that after my last discussion, for those of you who didn't watch, I imagined how I would film King Kong if I had unlimited budgets and whatever. And essentially, my version of King Kong was this kind of protracted, mystical, and kind of subconsciously sexual quest through this kind of Skull Island, which was not an actual island but a portal to an underworld, and it was just a non-stop parade of Kong battling various monsters and snake people and whatever. It's a fun and quirky discussion. Go and watch the previous video if you want to hear more about it. But I was really surprised when two of my friends, Dominic Clausen and Ashley Patch, contributed to this discussion by making fan art of my last podcast, which has to establish, I guess, a new sort of threshold for fan art, because it's really, all kinds of fan art is a real compliment, okay? But fan art based on comics, arts, movies, that's great. But fan art based on just words on a podcast is just a new level of flattery for me. So thank you. Dominic Clausen contributed with this image of the Skull Island crawlers imagined as a race of snake people. I said no images and movies in these podcasts, but I'm breaking the rule. Here it is. And then Ashley Patch depicted these Skull Island gods, which were in my ideal King Kong film, these kind of godlike, mountain-like creatures, which oversaw the evolution of all these monstrous creatures in the film franchise. And the depiction is really bizarre. They look like octopi or mountains, and you can see it obviously. So there, thank you guys. It's a real compliment, and stuff like this really motivates me to make more, to say more, produce more. Anyways, back to the movie review. I don't want to get too long, but it was a pleasant surprise, okay? I think they did a really good job with the characters. I described a lot of attitude and posing in the trailers, and yeah, some of that carried over, but on the overall, the human characters of the film were really well thought out and fleshed out. They were still kind of B-movie comic characters, but they were also characters you could care for. There was this one guy who's been abandoned on the island since World War II, and he has kind of this nice, tearful reunification with his wife after years. Those are all really cool. Tom Hiddleston, the main man, I think ever since the 1980s Indiana Jones movies, we have a real all-action hero now, where he is not just swashbuckling, but also somehow endearing. I think in none of the previous action adventure movies they've been able to pull this off quite so good. And then moving on, the lead lady character, okay, I guess you have to have this trope when you have a Kong movie, so there's a kind of damsel in distress, but they try to make her too kind of strong, and it was just silly when they're in this kind of malarial insect and disease infested jungle and all the characters, including another lady character, are dressed really like for the occasion, like long sleeves and whatever. But this woman struts around with a kind of pastiche of a kind of Nike sports gear, looking very athletic. And I think they could have dialed down the power girl thing a bit. Maybe it was kind of injected as a counterbalance to the damsel in distress trope. But anyways, whatever. Other details. I really thought I saw a Star Wars reference in the... Okay, so the characters get abandoned in this island, and another guy who's been on this island since World War II has cobbled together a riverboat out of the remains of Japanese and American Pacific Front fighters and bombers and whatever. And this boat really looks, and in the movie feels, like the Millennium Falcon of the Star Wars fame. And I think this is intentional, and I think it's a neat hat tip on their behalf. Even one of the characters says, "This looks like a hunk of junk. What a pile of junk!" But says, "Don't you dare speak badly about this pile of junk. It was a labor of love, whatever." And obviously, there's this kind of, again, the Millennium Falcon trope has found a new role. Even the turrets kinda recall the turret scene. Well, you'll see the movie, you know what I'm talking about. That was interesting. Another pet peeve I had about the movie was in the trailers they show this kind of natives of the island, which kind of build this graffiti-like cave paintings in order to show their veneration of King Kong as a god. And it's just terrible. It looks like a kind of Banksy art done for the Instagram generation. And well, that was still terrible. I think it's a kind of... But the culture of the natives themselves, there was something weird about them. I think it's like the production designers just opened a can of Acme generic ethnic people. But also there's something that recalls the 1999 movie The Matrix, about the tattoos on these natives' faces. They are not like Maori tattoos or tribal tattoos, but they kind of look like digital characters. And when you watch the film, you will see that they're trying to plug this into a bigger franchise. And maybe these native guys, I don't know, they're not, McDonald's ethnic psychedelic trance Burning Man people, but maybe they're actually the representatives of some far more advanced race that are so advanced that they're kind of, in the film they tell they live so long, they can communicate without speaking, whatever. It's hinted that they may even be Hyperboreans or Atlanteans. And if you look at these people's face tattoos, the design is similar to, as I told just now, the Matrix movie, but also to that strange late 1990s animation, The Secret of Atlantis or whatever. It's like kind of this digital looking and geeky and weird. I don't know, maybe I'm reading too much into a production design idea, but anyways. I was speaking about characters and attitude, and there was another thing that really kind of was out of place. But once again, I'm not complaining about these, but these out of place mistakes in the production can also tell us a lot about our popular culture too. And what I'm trying to say is okay, this movie is set in the Vietnam War era, I think in 1974. And there's this kind of gung-ho bunch of Vietnam helicopter marines, and they team up with Hidi and John Goodman and his kind of science guys, and then Nike sportswear stand-in lady, and they go on the island and whatever. Okay, one of the marines is this kind of really stereotypical cynical Vietnam hippie character, and they go to the island, and because this is a 70s nostalgia thing, they have all these 70s songs playing every now and then, and to justify that, you actually have shots of some of the characters lugging around a portable record player while they are going on this life and death mission. So it's a very fun way to justify extra diegetic music. I don't know, but so anyways, there's this one shot where this kind of hippie soldier is like talking with this castaway guy who's been on the island since the 1940s, and the castaway dude says, "Hey, how is life like?" or whatever, and then the hippie soldier dude just starts playing him a David Bowie soundtrack. I think it's Moon Age Daydream, and he's like, "This is what the new kids are listening, man. It's what the things are happening." Now this particular instance had me quite peeved, as I say, because it's 1974. David Bowie's, there's this Bowie washing that's happening in popular culture these days after the man died, conveniently. And if you noticed, flashback to, have you watched this kind of Generation X nostalgia wank series, Stranger Things? And there's a scene there too of Bowie washing right there. So in Stranger Things, I'm going on a wild tangent here, but in Stranger Things, there's this kind of outcast kid in the 80s, and he's from a broken family, but he's got a cool brother to watch out for him because his dad left, blah, blah, blah. And the cool brother once again says, you gotta do what all the other people are not doing. You gotta get in on your learning. You gotta listen to your Bowie, your Bob Dylan and whatever. And he's showing his little brother all the kind of David Bowie, whatever. In the 80s. Now the thing is, around those times in the 1980s, and in the time King Kong is set, the 1974, David Bowie had just gotten out, okay? And his music and his kind of transsexual persona, it's like a common currency these days, but back then it had met a great reaction. Outside of Britain, in America, he was kind of, especially in 1974, David Bowie was either unknown or universally derided as this kind of, I don't know, limey wanker or whatever. I mean, so it's really implausible that you got this battle-hardened Marine from Vietnam, and even though he has got this kind of hippie leanings, he's like, the first thing he's doing is strutting out David Bowie and talking about, yeah, this is what all the cool kids. It's like, I think maybe it's a generational thing, but it's like having a movie about the Afghanistan war in 2001, okay? And this kind of burly, what's his name? Chris Kyle? The guy in American Sniper. It's like you have an American Sniper type of guy, and he's talking about, yeah, man, Lady Gaga, that's what everyone is watching. That's how David Bowie was. That's how outre he was back then. So, yeah, that's one thing I found quite implausible, and it got me kind of, come on. But, discussing this is actually more fun than the film itself. So, tells us a lot about our culture. I think in these action-adventure movies, there's this trend to romanticize the wars of our previous generation, the wars of our father's generation. You see, Indiana Jones was set in against the Nazis, and that's the war of the generation of Steven Spielberg's dad. Now we have these nostalgic films set in the Vietnam era, and once again it's the battle we didn't get to live through, and now it's comfortably romanticized. And who knows, maybe in 20-30 years they will be kind of Gulf War action adventure fantasy movies. Who knows, you could have a kind of Babylonian gods or mummies in the deserts of Iraq kind of thing, or I don't know, something like Syrian sand demon or lost city, whatever. Once the wars are comfortably wrapped up and the traumas have been dealt with, I think movie producers are free to turn them into legends, and I guess that's how most legends are born, aren't they? So anyways, from King Kong to David Bowie to this, it's a nice excursion on culture and films and whatever. So more things about King Kong. Okay, I discussed the monsters and the creatures in detail, and it was fun. I mean, all the monsters there were these kind of bird-like things which flew in the most bizarre way imaginable. This kind of swarm of pterosaur-like things, but they're not pterosaurs or bats or anything. And they have this kind of V-shape wings pointing forwards. And the tips of their wings are like clubs. And there's not much of a wing to speak of. They just kind of wave these clubs around and fly. And that was really bizarre. It was so counterintuitive. I mean, obviously, something like this has no real chance of flying. But when you think about it, do these animals have anti-gravity nodules on top of their wings or whatever? Biological anti-gravity. But anyways, I'm reading too much into this. I mean, they look like these kind of, again, inverted V flying bat, rat, pterosaur things with kind of the nose of a sawfish. I think it's a cool design. I think they look like this kind of immature forms of this kaiju monsters you saw in the 1911 film Pacific Rim. Not 1911, 2011, 2013, whatever. They look really strange, and they basically exist as a plot device, you know. They in like 2 minutes they kill one of the characters, so one of the two teams of people on the island have a chance of saying, we lost some people out there too. And then they get one of the guys kind of Tom Hiddleston attacks them with a sword and a gas mask for no reason, and they bleed blue and green goop because they're like gremlins. You know, they have no they can't show blood, so they're there. And those were that. I think the Star Wars tropes, we discussed them in detail. Another thing I'm getting really sick of is the sound effects trope. So okay, whenever there's a big monster, you have this kind of engine reverberation kind of noise. So a monster, they're always screaming, of course, that's kind of like a given these days. But these monsters, when they scream, the sound isn't like wah or but it's more like or like there's some noise like and it not just in these movies, every movie, it's like this kind of sound designer's trope. This is something that's going to evolve into the kind of monstrozoological equivalent of the Wilhelm scream soon, and future generations are going to look at all the movies and laugh at all these monsters with kind of like, I don't know, motorcycle kind of I think this kind of sounds. And I think weirdly enough this trend was started in the Star Wars prequel, The Phantom Menace, because they sound like a monsterified sound of the pod racers, because it's like and obviously this is the sound designers getting their rocks off on the Dolby stereo, because you can make the sound like left right left right left right. That's an interesting thing. You want to design a creepy sound effect? Record a goddamn bird, slow it down 1000%, and play on that, please. Come on. I mean, by the way, if you're curious, search for bird songs slowed down, and then you'll get some good sound design. Who knows? Maybe even in a movie we'll get to see them. So, anyways, long story short, bish bash bosh. Kong, Skull Island, great film actually. Lovable characters, predictable but fun action, and this kind of, at the end, this very interesting reveal that in my last episode I was speculating on how Skull Island might actually be a portal to the underworld, and I guess, I don't know, it's a funny coincidence, but in this film they actually do say that this island is a portal to the Hollow Earth. So, believe it or not, I didn't know of this when I was recording the previous podcast. So there's a nice similarity there. And then at the end of the movie, if you're going to see it, watch the credits. And at the end, there's an extra scene showing that this is basically a first film in a bigger, longer franchise. And now in the future films, you're gonna have Godzilla and Rodan and that three-headed Japanese monster I don't remember the name of. So yeah, all the film series are converging now that producers have finally figured out the secret of combining gigantic multi-character, multi-film narratives in a convincing way. I think they're gonna go Marvel superheroes on this monster franchise too, and it's gonna be interesting. Well, bish bash bosh, guys, this is it. I kind of made a secret promise to myself, don't get popular, don't dwell into pop culture, but here we are in the problem of movies again. But yeah, I can't deny it's fun, so it's fun, and I guess I'll do more movie reviews as they come along. Anyways, that was it. King Kong, good movie, go see it, and always keep in mind, like when you're seeing these popular culture things, popular culture is always more than popular culture. Little tropes and references can tell us about our culture and how we change history into myth and so on and so forth. And I think even the blandest, the most crap movie has an interesting thing to say as for us as a species and for our respective different cultures and whatever. That's strange. Life goes on. Have a nice day. Goodbye.